before I could trash talk. Yeah, just one quick thing about militias. I think militias are often very misunderstood. There's a variety of reasons and motives. I think some are very dangerous, very...
Well, I mean, it's interesting that this country started because a bunch of militias that took arms against foreign power.
Yeah. Absolutely. The skills that we're going to have to develop, this is where the government better get serious about fucking putting veterans to use and paying us to do some good things. When I say that, I mean give us jobs.
Right.
Freaking... working on the ground, working not just in communities, but working to understand, to talk to militias, to negotiate. So, like, if you're in a war zone, the best way to deal with militias is to either engage them, talk to them, or try to find ways to work with them.
Right.
In terms of mediating solutions, right?
Yeah, that's a good
Same
point.
thing in our country. Most people, I think, in militias are probably... A lot of them are misunderstood. A lot of them don't wake up thinking that they're bad, or they don't wake up thinking, hey, I want to just kill people. No, a lot of times they really genuinely believe there's a threat that is going to encroach on their liberty and that they're just standing up something in their backyard. And also, I think it gives people a sense of meaning, community, and purpose. Now, there are some that are very dangerous that we need to take very fucking seriously, and there are some right-wing extremists, racist, possible neo-Nazi elements, some of whom are, sadly to say, some are veterans and some are very highly trained. That is becoming a threat as well. That isn't to say that we should blindly stereotype veterans that are part of militias. And it's not to say that most militiamen are veterans. There's a lot of militias that a veteran will look at them and be like, the fuck are these guys? These guys are idiots.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other militias where they're pretty squared away. And so I think the only way to assess that is to have people on the ground to analyze and understand the social, psychological dynamics, but also the kind of order of battle, like what kind of weapons they're using, what's their motivation,
Right.
So the way you deal with the Clive and Bundy ranch would be different than how you deal with a couple of bubbas, propping up a weekly meeting, shooting for fun. Like, these are different situational awareness kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, because one thing is, you served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and Iraq is... Well, we're still involved there, and it's still a topic that is being brought up in this election a lot. Trump likes to talk. Trump criticizes our intervention in Iraq as a way to attack Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton says she has a plan for improving things there. I mean, first off, one question I think a lot of people want to know is, as a veteran, do you have... Because there's this feeling in America of disappointment and that we failed at our job in Iraq because of the violence that's happening there now.
Yeah.
As a veteran who worked there, I mean, where did we go wrong?
That was really a haunting thing for me. I know a lot of people felt this way. We really wanted to a lot of us wanted to make a difference, and there's part of me that felt like, this is unworkable and we're doing all this for nothing and it sucks and we just want to,
like, there's no chance that we could have...
Or even if we can, we just get very jaded and we get tired of trying to believe in anything higher up. We get tired of trying to see anything redeeming in this. And then there's also another part of me that really genuinely wanted Iraq to thrive, and I still want Iraq to thrive. I care deeply about that country, I really do, and the people and all that. And and then so there's that part of me that really thought that maybe even if only a small difference like we can make, we should, that's worth doing. Or there's all this sunken costs, all these lives and time we put into this. We really want there to be some redeemable outcome. We want to salvage something worth saving. And it ultimately has to be driven by the Iraqi people and the Iraqi government. It has to come from them. Mm-hmm. That's the idea of a transitional handoff, is we hand it over to the Iraqi government and into the people, and then we slowly fade out of the picture. And that is the idea. And that is in the spirit of self-determination. It's not only moral, but it's the only practical way you can win these wars. This kind of asymmetric conflict where you have these irregular belligerents and irregular forces, and you have, unconventional warfare. You can't just win that force on force is the only solution. It has to come from the people and the government. So very different than Cold War paradigm of, my big army versus your big army. So we're in what's called asymmetric warfare, irregular and nonlinear. So these conflicts typically range, like a decade, and the insurgency the idea is that they become stamped out. They'll either quit, they'll be reintegrated back into the population, or they'll just dissipate because the people stop supporting them and the government becomes strong enough. They have some basic legitimacy, and it's still going to be a shithole, but it's going to be just have enough. It's going to be legitimate just enough to hold the country together. That's the idea. Now that said, there's a lot of mistakes along the way, like debathification. Taking jobs away from the Iraqi insurgents who could have. So now instead of being reintegrated into the population, they're now out of a job, and now they're going to go become insurgents. That was a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Now that said, I think I felt like this. A lot of the problem was not only the power vacuum created, which ISIS filled, and which created the proxy war between Shia Sunni, backed by Iran and other
Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And
right, exactly. For these regional aspirations, but at the same time, the feelings of betrayal between Shia and Sunni going back and forth, and the Maliki government and things like that, the Sadrist movement, and so you had this. A lot of people, when they feel cornered, they feel desperate. They often will turn to extremism. They'll turn to something that restores their sense of control. So a lot of Sunnis felt very betrayed by the Maliki government, by the Shia government.
Yeah.
And there's a phrase, I think the author's name is John Hope or something. He wrote a book called "How the Poor Can Save Capitalism." I think that's the book. I haven't read it, but it's a very good book. And there's a quote from that. Where he says the most dangerous person is a person without hope. That is profound because, and this can apply to our country here at home.
Yeah.
It can apply all over the world. When people feel they have no hope, when they feel marginalized, threatened, they feel that the government is siding against their tribe or their sect or their future, they're going to hedge in favor of of feeling a sense of security or feeling a sense of control. And a lot of militants, both Shia and Sunni, capitalized on this fear, this vacuum, and
this hopelessness that the government was going to.
Yeah. So Muqtada al-Sadr masterfully did this with poor, disenfranchised, angry Shia, especially in Sadr City and Baghdad, and Sunni insurgents, and now ISIS is doing it with a lot of people that feel like they have nowhere to turn.
Well, and it's interesting you bring up that hopelessness, because sociologists have found that the counties in America where the death rate for white men, the counties where that death rate has gone up the sharpest, are also the counties where you see the most support for Donald Trump in this election.
Right.
Which is interesting that the hopelessness in the country, especially in certain sections of the country, has caused people to sort of, lash out at this. They don't trust the system. Yeah.
Yeah. They looked at the cognitive neuroscience and the moral psychology of why people vote, especially people that fear change, or they feel when people feel angry, desperate, or indignified or humiliated in some way, they often need to demonize an out group, and then they bond to an in group. So, the classic example is, these people are taking our jobs and they get angry at immigrants. That's not to say that every argument against immigrants taking jobs is driven by, bigotry. It's not always the case. There could be some people that legitimately feel the economic argument is that these people shouldn't take our jobs. Although I'd say the data doesn't really support that. I think the data economically says that, Mexican immigration or Latino immigration is actually not a big macroeconomic threat to your jobs. But
it's
and I'm willing
probably better thing.
And I'm willing to be wrong on that data set, but on a personal level. So I'm not saying that all, or even most, upset about immigrants taking the jobs is driven by bigotry, but it often is. And even when it's not, it often enshrines a kind of in-group, out-group dynamic where people say, they bond around something, around symbolism, around movements that give them a sense of belonging and a way to hedge against this feeling of being marginalized.
Right.
And then they become it's much easier then to galvanize them against an out-group or to demonize an out-group. And this out-group could be Hillary Clinton, it could be, the status quo. I mean, there are legitimate reasons to be angry at the status quo. There are legitimate reasons for people to be, worried about Clinton. I mean, these are all... But at the same time, it also makes it easier for demagogues to play people against other outgroups
Right.
like to blatantly demonize immigrants or to blatantly demonize refugees. It's much easier to do that with people that are susceptible to tribalism and who are poor and desperate.
Yeah. So in many ways, there's a lot of parallels between Iraq and America right now in terms of what I mean, you can see some of the same effects and problems playing out.
This is something I'm working on several books, but one of them is about kind of a counter-extremism project here at home where we fight this polarization by identifying common ground and mapping out utility across groups. So, for example, in Iraq, the Anbar Awakening was about working with the Sunni tribes and saying you may not always like us, but you definitely, your biggest enemy is Al-Qaeda and foreign fighters. Sort of like Alien versus Predator, where the enemy and my enemy is my friend. So people will make these temporary alliances based on that. So we're able to help stand up a lot of empower this kind of tribal leadership in these coalitions in the Sunni Triangle against Al-Qaeda. And in similar fashion, we can identify and map out common ground or common moral terrain or shared sentiments between the left and the right, or between Black Lives Matter and police, where you say, look, police want to go home to their families, they want to flourish. If they build a relationship with the neighborhood they're in, they're better able to do their jobs and catch the bad guys. They'll be safer walking the streets, and everyone's better off. If you're a Black Lives Matter, it's like, look, you want to build good dialogue with police or retired cops that can speak freely about the system, that can help reform the system, and work with the ones that can change the system.
Yeah.
So it's in everyone's interest to maximize. Is our friend Robert Wright talks about a non-zero, a situation where everybody's better off.
Right.
A cooperative arrangement where we're
And how do we get there politically, though? From this election, which just, like you said, I mean, feels so hopeless, so dispiriting.
Yeah.
I mean, how do we get to a point where we feel like we can move forward together as a country after this thing that is the 2016
Well,
election?
I tell you what, brother, man. This whole thing, I've been hiding my true accent. I'm from Georgia, so I'm gonna let it out. I'm gonna let it all out on the table here, man. I tell you what, the best thing to do is vote for Donald John Trump. Hey, I tell you what, that's he done fix everything, and I tell you that Obama, he better done get up and out of here, and I'm gonna vote me for some Donald Trump. That's what we do. I tell you what, man.
I don't condone this stereotyping of Georgian people, but yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No, not at all, man. That's actually not how Georgians talk. I was. They talk a little more like Kevin Spacey and Midnight of God and Good and Evil. So if you ever go to Savannah, Georgia, I'll be happy to make your acquaintance and offer you a charming beverage. And play some local golf or something. But no, so here's the thing. I think the real starting point is something called moral psychology. Why, as Jonathan Haidt would say, why good people disagree on politics and religion. Recognizing that we often are coming from different political languages and different values and what they call moral axes. A lot of conservatives tend to be more resistant to change. They like hierarchy. They like spirituality, or at least they're more prone to sacredness, the idea of sacredness, which is kind of an abstract. So, for example, you can spray. As I understand, you can spray hand sanitizer in the air, and just from people inhaling that, it'll trigger something in the brain that'll get them to pull more conservative on a political questionnaire, because it taps into this kind of purity, sanctity idea, this cleanliness idea. That's why people often wash their hands. That idea, that ritual, is often associated with the idea or the concept of purity and cleanliness, which can map on to political ideas of purity. That's why, for example, Republicans are more likely to object to Obama taking his jacket off in the Oval Office,
right?
Or to, they're more angry about flags being burned, so they're more likely to respect religious symbols, whereas liberals are like, fuck everything, we'll just show our penis or whatever. Like, there's reasons for this. Like, one thing is, if you see a piece of art and it shows lewd vulgarity, and one person's sitting there with their wine glass and they like the art and they're talking about how beautiful it is, and the other person's like disgusted. They're giving off all these like micro expressions of just disgust, and you can kind of tell one's probably more likely to vote more conservative or for one candidate, the other's more likely to vote Democrat.